When my younger sister, Marissa, called me 3 weeks before her lakeside wedding, I expected to hear about flowers, seating arrangements, or some last-minute disaster with the caterer. But instead, she calmly informed me that my 16-year-old daughter, Nora, would not be allowed to attend. She said the wedding weekend was going to be strictly for adults, even though Nora had already been helping with decorations, had been invited to several planning dinners, and had spent months listening to everyone talk about the ceremony as if she were part of the family celebration. I reminded Marissa that Nora was old enough to travel without constant supervision, had never caused trouble at a family gathering, and had actually been looking forward to the weekend because she adored the lake where the wedding was being held. But Marissa simply sighed and told me I was making something simple unnecessarily complicated. Then she added, almost casually, that a few of her friends had children around Nora's age, but those kids were different circumstances. A phrase that struck me harder than the exclusion itself, because it made it clear that this wasn't really about age, noise, or wedding logistics. Instead of arguing over whether my daughter deserved a chair at the reception, I asked one question. If Nora isn't welcome, are you expecting me to attend without her? Marissa hesitated before answering. Of course, you're still my sister. And something inside me finally became very clear, because she wanted the relationship to remain unconditional for herself, while making my daughter's place within the family conditional whenever it was convenient. I told her I wouldn't attend, and she immediately accused me of turning a small wedding decision into a family crisis. But I refused to fight because I knew that once a person starts defending someone's worth at the dinner table, the conversation has already gone too far. That evening, Nora found me sitting on the back porch and asked whether the wedding plans had changed, and when I explained what happened, she stared at the floor for several seconds before whispering, I guess people can make you feel unwanted without actually saying they don't want you. Then let her believe that she had somehow caused the problem. I told her that adults sometimes create rules for reasons they don't fully admit, and her value was never something another person could determine with an invitation. We spent that weekend doing something completely different, driving 3 hours north to a small mountain town where we rented a cabin, cooked terrible pancakes together, explored an old bookshop, and laughed so much that for a few hours I almost forgot how painful it had been to watch my daughter quietly accept another rejection. Then came the wedding photographs, hundreds of them appearing across social media with captions about family forever, everyone who matters, and the people who make life complete, and Nora saw one of the pictures before I could close my phone. She didn't say anything, but later that night she asked me whether I thought people actually meant what they wrote online, and I told her that sometimes people celebrate the idea of family much more enthusiastically than they practice the responsibilities that come with being one. Months passed, and the incident became an uncomfortable subject that nobody wanted to mention, until my mother announced that our family would host its annual winter reunion at my parents' renovated farmhouse outside Asheville. She called it a fresh start, but I immediately noticed that her message contained a list of rules about food, schedules, sleeping arrangements, and guests. And at the bottom was one sentence explaining that the gathering would be limited to immediate family and approved adult guests. I stared at that sentence for a long time before replying, because technically Nora was immediate family, but the phrase, approved adult guests, reminded me how easily vague rules could be used to make one person feel like an exception. Instead of confronting my mother, I sent a simple message saying that Nora and I would be hosting our own family dinner the same evening, and that anyone who wanted to join us was welcome, regardless of age, relationship status, or whether they had been personally approved by someone else. The reaction was immediate, and my brother Daniel called me first, laughing nervously as he asked whether I was seriously planning to hold a competing Christmas dinner across town. I told him it wasn't a competition at all, because I wasn't trying to punish anyone or steal guests from my parents. I was simply creating a gathering where the same standard applied to everyone, and if someone was considered family when they needed an invitation, but an inconvenience when they needed one themselves, then perhaps we needed to stop pretending the two situations were equivalent. That evening, I prepared a long dining table in the community hall near our house. And to my surprise, people began arriving one by one, including cousins who normally stayed out of family disagreements, and even two of my sister's closest friends who admitted they had never understood why Nora had been excluded from the wedding weekend. My mother arrived near the end, looked around the room at teenagers sitting beside grandparents, college students talking with married couples, and children passing plates of food between the tables, and quietly asked me, "Is this what you wanted?" I told her that what I wanted was much simpler than winning an argument. I wanted Nora to grow up knowing that she never had to earn her place at a family table by becoming more convenient, quieter, older, or more acceptable to someone else's social plans. Marissa arrived 20 minutes later, and for the first time since the wedding conversation, she didn't defend the decision or accuse me of overreacting. She simply looked at Nora, took a breath, and said, "I handled that badly." Nora looked surprised because she had clearly prepared herself for another explanation, another excuse, or another rule that would somehow make the original exclusion reasonable. But instead, Marissa admitted that she had been worried about appearances and had treated certain guests as more important than others. Nobody applauded, nobody gave a dramatic speech, and there was no magical moment where every old problem disappeared. But the honesty in that room mattered more than any perfect apology, because for once the family wasn't hiding behind convenient language. I learned that night that setting a boundary doesn't always mean walking away from people, and it certainly doesn't require shouting, revenge, or humiliating someone who hurt you. Sometimes it simply means refusing to participate in a system where the rules change depending on who benefits from them. Nora eventually joined Marissa's conversation, and although they didn't suddenly become inseparable, they talked for nearly an hour, which felt more meaningful than pretending everything had been fine all along. A year later, when Marissa announced that she and her husband were renewing their vows, she personally called Nora before sending invitations to anyone else in the family and asked whether she would help choose the music for the ceremony. Nora laughed and told her she would think about it, and when Marissa hung up, she looked at me and said, "You know, Mom, I think this time she actually understood." Maybe that was the real lesson hidden inside everything that happened. Families aren't defined by perfect photographs, matching holiday traditions, or slogans about unconditional love, but by whether people are willing to examine their behavior when someone they love quietly says, "This doesn't feel fair." Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.